Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co-hostess, Anna, and I'm here with...
Hello, all you frightlings and grieflings. I'm Margaret, and welcome to a fun, exciting, titillating episode today. Anna, what movies are we discussing today?
Well, today it's going to be extra special because we're talking about none other than Pearl. She's my girl. If you don't like her, I'll tell the world because she's a star.
She is a star. She's going to be famous.
Mm-hmm. This is a great trilogy. However, the first two have only come out, so we're going to be talking about X and Pearl. If you cannot tell, I am overly enthusiastic about these films, so brace yourselves. But before we dive too deeply in, let's talk about some of the triggers. So, of course, we've got blood, violence, and gore. We also have geriatric sexuality. And I think that's something that no one really talks about, but we're going to talk about it today. And it does make some people uncomfortable. So if you're part of the group that it makes uncomfortable, you don't have to stick around. But if you'd like to hear it and maybe learn some more about these movies, please stick around. We also have feelings of being trapped, isolation, illness, pandemic, because Pearl is taking place during a time where there was a pandemic as well. Margaret, what else?
Also, we have sexuality again. Binary sexuality. So, listeners, if you know of non binary, non conforming, gender neutral, or expanding the horizons, please let us know. We would love to watch these films and discuss them because, yet again, we are finding in our horror film industry, they are very binary. Maybe they might have the token gay character. I can't think of any horror movies that have a predominant trans character. Can you, Anna?
They slash them, but I was not super jazzed about that movie for a variety of reasons. I thought it was super predictable and so much more could have been done with it and in a better way, in my humble opinion. But I guess that'll be another episode.
Yes.
But also with the triggers, pornography, right? Filming porn. Working in adult entertainment, working in the sex industry, and also religious-based mentality. As we find out in X, that's a huge perpetrator in the entire film, even though it's really just one scene where everything kind of glues itself together.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding the listeners that, yes, there's a religious overtone to both movies. Pearl, I did not find it as in your face as X.
Yeah, and I think for me, the religious type behavior in Pearl is much different than what we're exposed to in X. I think we'll get to that in a little while. One thing that I would strongly suggest, let me know if you agree, Margaret, is to watch the films in order. Watch X first, and then watch Pearl, and then eventually when Maxine comes out, watch that, which is going to be super good. I'm so excited for it. Mia Goth, if you ever listen to this, shout out. You are amazing, and I love you. And if I ever meet you, I will give you a hug. Unless you don't like hugs, then I will give you a high five instead.
Yes. Yeah. I think the acting in both movies was awesome. Jenna Ortega, Brittany Snow. It was a powerhouse of strong, feminine actresses really showing up. And I love Brittany Snow really just owning being a porn star and living her best life in her body. And Jenna Ortega, that I think as women, a lot of us can relate, and we're just jumping in, listeners, to that.
Yeah.
Curious about your sexuality, curious about who you are as a lover, what turns you on, what feels good. And we can see that with Jenna. And then sadly in our society, her boyfriends struggle with her coming to terms with her sexual power. And then it essentially destroying the relationship.
Right. Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, I enjoyed seeing Brittany Snow when she first came on screen. I'm like, is that Brittany Snow? And then like by the end, well, you know, before she gets killed, I'm like, get it. You know, I'm so excited because it was great to see her in that role. Even the casting was very thought out because we're so used to her as one character type. So to see her as like a porn star with a hot boyfriend, I was like, yeah, go on, girl. Like, get it. But watching it today, I thought the movie was very funny. There were some really hilarious parts to me, given I do have a demented sense of humor. But I think even now, people were taken aback by the way the actors and actresses filming the porn movie were thinking. Like, I don't want to live a life like everyone else. It's just work. Like, you know, why would you not want to get paid to have an orgasm? Like, those sorts of things are even kind of taboo today, which is wild because this film was supposed to take place in the 70s, and here we are, 2024, and people are still weirded out by like enjoying sex.
Yes, that's a beautiful point about how, right, there is that like whole taboo around what they're doing. And like, no, this is work. We're getting paid. We enjoy our work. Why wouldn't we enjoy it? And even the videographer, like, he really is like, I want to make this into art. And bringing that, this is art. Yeah, there is porn that is horrific and abusive and horrible. And yet, when we are with our partners, that's art. That is beauty when we are in a consensual relationship. And I really appreciate him saying, like, no, like, I want to make art. I want to make this into something beautiful, because in consensual relationships,
Yeah,
sex is beautiful. And again, like you said, Anna, not even in 2024, we don't talk about sex.
right.
We don't, it's still so taboo. It's still very like, oh no, that is,
Yeah.
you don't do that, and you don't talk about it if you do it.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And it's just amazing to me. And that's the thing is, like, you know, you bring up consent, and we've had casts previously where we've really spoken about non-consent actions, right? But we do have to remember, like you said, I mean, human sexuality is a beautiful thing. Sex is a great thing. It's normal. It's healthy. If you and other participants are consenting and willing and enthusiastic, and it is not anything detrimental to your physical, emotional, or mental health, like, enjoy yourself. There's nothing wrong with that.
And I feel like you've touched on that undercurrent of Pearl, of X, that Pearl, given the generation she's born into, she can be a sexual person. It's denied in her, and she wants it. She's horny. She wants to get out there. I mean, she's having sex with a scarecrow.
Yeah.
And Pearl, right? And it's that, no, that's not,
Right.
it's not okay. She can't be seen as that. And I'm curious, I want to know your take. Howard, like in X, he switches to where he's like kidnapping men so Pearl can like get her rocks off because he'll have a heart attack. What was your take on that dynamic in their relationship, that Howard is participating so that Pearl can have an orgasm because he can't?
This is going to sound kind of twisted, but Howard really loves Pearl. That's my take on it, because we learn in the movie Pearl, he comes home to find corpses at the dining room table. So then if you think about when you watch X, they're still at the farmhouse, right? And which we'll talk about in a little bit for other reasons. But he helped her clean up that mess. We learn that he's helped clean up a lot of messes. So he truly loves her and will do whatever it takes to make her happy. And as twisted as their relationship is and the behaviors that they exhibit are, how many of us only dream of being in a relationship where our partner would sacrifice whatever they could and do whatever they could to make us happy, and we would do the same for them, right? So in a way, it is very sweet and beautiful, you know, except like the murder part. But yeah, so I think Howard truly loves Pearl. I think that part of it, though, too, is like the death of that part of their relationship, right? Because people don't talk about that either, is, you know, just when there is no intimacy in a relationship anymore and the physicality is gone, eventually that impacts the emotional intimacy and the trust as well. So by using these other characters to fulfill her sexual needs, they're still able to have those other levels of intimacy because physically her needs are being met, just not by him. What's your take?
Oh, I agree with you. It's like, wow, he really is dedicated to her, that he is willing to participate. I could also see maybe some codependency, fear of being abandoned going on there, because nobody's like, hey, you know what? I got a bad heart. Go ahead and go have sex with Farmer Joe next door.
Mm-hmm.
They're kidnapping and murdering people.
Yeah.
So there isn't that like, hey, this is not the right way to go about this. In a healthy relationship, it would be, okay, I can't satisfy you. How do we make this work?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a polyamorous relationship? Do we have an open door policy? What is it, so that you can still get your needs met and we can still be in a relationship? And like, you're right, Howard came back, I'm guessing traumatized from the war.
Mm-hmm.
And so for him, dead bodies is sadly, I'm guessing, something he's used to. And so he's just kind of like, okay, how do we clean this up?
Mm-hmm.
So almost the relationship gets the most respect, and they lack respect for others that are not part of that.
Right. And, you know, we don't know, like, we know that he came and worked on Pearl's family farm, but we don't know how he got there, why he was doing it, how he fell in love with the farm. So she may be holding many of his secrets that we never find out as well.
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Point. So we don't know, other than he was rich.
Yeah. And who knows how, like, their family got money. I mean, you know, there's so many different things that, you know, could have happened. Maybe he killed his dad and that was all the inheritance. I don't know. I'm just, you know, theorizing. But, you know, for me, speaking of like falling in love with the farm, I connected with Pearl a lot. Also Maxine, but mostly with Pearl because, so I grew up, now it's kind of a metropolitan city, but when I grew up, it was a small town, very country, very rural. Family members had farms, a few still do. And a lot of the mentality that Pearl was exposed to me, is very country or farm centric or rural, because I can remember growing up hearing a lot of the same things, like, don't think about what you do not have, make the best out of what you do have. You know, you're going to stay here. You're not going to leave. You have to be here for your family. Sacrifice is what life's about, and hard work, not being happy, not dithering in your dreams, those sorts of things. So for me, I kind of really empathize with Pearl, because it's very stressful. Like, am I ever going to leave the farm? Is anyone ever going to love me in the way that I need to be loved? Why doesn't anyone understand me? Why do people expect me to sacrifice myself and my life and what I want to support the family? Why does it have to be me? And I think a lot of it too, we don't know if Pearl has any siblings, but I would assume she's either the youngest, if she does have siblings, or she's the only child. And most of the time, caring for the family falls to the youngest, or if you're the only child by default, it falls to you. Because think about it, like, the youngest, everyone else is grown and gone while you're still growing up. So you're still there. You see your parents older, and you know what happens during aging more than your siblings do. So I think it's a lot of responsibility And, getting into that caregiving part, especially during that time, like men are supposed to be strong. Pearl's dad is infirmed. She's taking care of him. She's bathing him. She's helping him eat. She's doing all of those things. And, seeing a man like that, particularly your father during that time, had to be extremely difficult. Her mom is just trying to get through the day. Like, she's trying to be tough, right? And once again, the whole farm thing, like, one of the toughest people you will ever meet is a woman who grew up on a farm. Because you experience and you see so many different things during your childhood and during your young adulthood, at least in my opinion. So I think that part of it is she's just tough because she has to be. She's too proud to ask for help, which once again, very, very common of women in that position during that time. So I think pride is a big thing. And I think sometimes too with Pearl's mom, we get so caught up in just getting through and sustaining what we have and trying to maintain that we forget everything else, whether it be the people around us, what we want, what we need. Sometimes we're not afforded the luxury of being selfish or thinking about our own needs and desires and wants. And I think that is just something that like really spoke to me on a very deep level, especially towards the end when Pearl makes like her 7-minute long speech. It just really hit me very hard because I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. Like whether you grew up in the country or the city, you grew up, in the P's, you grew up in a penthouse. I think that there are different situations in everyone's life that we really struggle with those things. And Pearl is a great example of that. I think that she is instrumentally grieving in a very bad way to much fault of her own. But she doesn't know what to do. Like she has all these feelings. She's got them bottled up. She can't let them out because who's going to listen to her, right? She's supposed to sit there and help take care of the family and sustain the farm and do all of these things. She shouldn't have time to worry, right? And think about it. Like she remarks that most of the livestock have died when the cinematographer visits, right? So she's seen death, loss. Before her dad was sick, they were doing well. So she's experienced so many other losses kind of leading up to this point. And I think that she just does not know how to deal with how she's feeling and figure out those emotions, right? Which is not uncommon during that time. I think the killing a bunch of people was very uncommon, and I don't recommend doing that, but I think that those feelings themselves were not uncommon at all.
Thank you so much for sharing about how you really relate to Pearl and her experience and growing up on a farm, and even touching on how that's different than if you grew up in a penthouse.
Mm-hmm.
And again, she's her dad's caretaker, and what was that experience like for her? And then grieving because he's becoming more and more incapable of self-care. Having a tough mom, I feel like you touched on farm life. You do have, it's like you have to have this exterior. There are things that can no longer, bother you. If livestock dies, if an animal dies, death happens. You don't have time to mourn. It becomes more of this, that cow died, let's go ahead, let's bury it, and let's replace the cow. And I feel like as you were discussing that, we see how Pearl then becomes desensitized. She detaches herself. For her, death is death. It's just something that happened. She grew up on the farm, so killing you is like, so if an animal's in pain, you put it out of its misery. So this human's in pain. Or I feel Pearl kind of takes it to
a different level.
You are not serving your function for me anymore, which also happens in farm life. If an animal's no longer serving its function, you're either going to sell it to get money, or you're going to have to kill it because it then takes food from your mouth.
Yeah. And I mean, an example of that would be like a lame horse, you know, you have to put it out of its misery because it can no longer do the work. Right. And unfortunately with horses, if they get a bad break or something, it's almost impossible for them to recover, and they are in extreme pain. Right. So from that perspective, you're doing the humane thing by euthanizing them, but you're also doing what's best for the collective group at the same time. And I think it is very difficult. I'm so sorry to any listener if you've not experienced any bit of rural life. This can be quite shocking. But I would really hope that you take the time to maybe learn about rural life a little bit more, visit a local 4-H or something like that, because it is a different lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, before we were industrialized, most people farmed, and that's just really what you had to do. So I'm so sorry if any of this is shocking to anyone. It is just part of that rural life, though.
Thank you for touching on that. And I agree. It's a different way of living. You look at life and death differently. Anna grew up rural. As a kid, we had chickens. So we always had fresh eggs and we had fresh chicken meat. And that just became normal. I can remember us getting like the little eggs and incubating them. And so sometimes we had ducks, sometimes we had geese, we had chickens. The whole point of these birds was to become food. The chickens were going to provide eggs. The duck, the goose, that was going to become a meal. And so it's very interesting, even from a theological point of view, we can see this in Pearl's journey. You really have this new look of like, death is finite and it's coming. We live in a society where we're like, I'm not going to die. I'm going to keep going, go. Medical procedures. When you grow up rurally, you know death is coming. Maybe because the horse broke its leg. Maybe because your parents every spring order eggs and then they're going to have fresh chicken. It's so Anna, thanks for touching on it. It's just a different way. And I'm curious how the world might be different if we actually taught kids and worked with them to have this kind of life is precious. And because it's precious, it's going to end. I feel like, again, Pearl, someplace in there, she completely desensitized, dehumanizes, just separates herself. There's some mental health there that I'm guessing was early, and because it's rural, nobody was noticing, oh, she's taking pleasure in killing the lame horse, because it's just normal. So you're not going to look at like, you kind of liked that a little too much.
Which you find out she does. I think especially when she takes one of Theta's eggs. I'm like, that's your pet. You don't take her eggs. And then, she smashes it. Which, I mean, from my perspective, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but, that was a waste of a baby gator, or it was a waste of a meal if they were really defunct in terms of food. It just was like, you're right. It was whatever brought her pleasure at the time. And I think that Pearl is, the pleasure center of her brain is what motivates her the most. I think that the serotonin and the dopamine that she gets when she's torturing and hurting and murdering, or, being sexual, it kind of overthrows anything else that might moderately be important to her.
And you touched on like how it is like, it's all about her and her feel good and her mom just getting by. And you can see it in her dad's eyes, because that's all he has is the expression. And so when she's doing things, you can see the fear in his eyes. Like when she's bathing and he's in the bathroom, you can see he's so uncomfortable. Or there was another scene where I think she's getting ready to kill him and she ended up not killing him. And he's terrified of his own
Yeah.
daughter, and he can't communicate. He can't say, like, hey, honey, like,
Mm-hmm.
our daughter's not right, because mom's just like, this is farm life. Like, get your shit together. Go get
Yeah.
dad's meds. Just,
Exactly.
we don't have time
Yeah.
to
And
be sick or
yeah, it's the scene where she takes him out on the dock and she calls the gator, which I love the fact that she's named Theta. What a great nod to the great actress who was in those, you know, burlesque risque movies back in the day. But, you know, because I'm like, shit, she's going to feed him to the gator, you know? But I do love that, like, her pet is still around when we get to X. I'm like, aw, that's like her friend, but her hungry friend. Um, you know, it may be Theta, maybe one of the eggs that actually survived, but I think that shows too that even though some of the things that Pearl does are very inhumane, she is still capable of like being compassionate and caring because she has this gator that is her pet.
Yes. Do you feel like her compassion, her caring, I feel like the only person that ever she really cares about is Howard. Because Howard's, she's cheating on him while he's away at war and he comes back. Do you feel like that is because he comes back and he cleans up her mess? He's shown her. I don't care how messy you are. I got you. I will clean up your mess.
He's showing her. He's, you know, emotionally supporting her. He's supporting her in a lot of ways. And I really do think that's why they have such a strong connection. The other thing too is like the cinematographer dude, you know, she thinks that they're connecting on some other level, right? But then
he's going to take her away.
Yeah, he's going to take her away and save her and this and that. But then she realizes when he comes to the farm, oh, he's just like everyone else, right? And then she gets really, really angry. I don't think she's angry so much that he's backing away. She's angry because she's realized you're just like the rest.
Well, she's a lot. Like, she needs a lot of reassurance.
Yes.
Just we see that with the cinematographer dude. Like, her insecurities are coming out, and that, oh, if you can't validate me, then I'm getting rid of you.
Yeah.
Or you used me. Like, you can see that sadness. And so how often in women that's seen as, oh, she's insecure and I have to validate her. And oftentimes for female presenting, there is this historically, like, women's role has been to serve the man, cook, clean, do these things. So you can see that in her, that seeking that validation. I am a good girl, especially in that generation. That,
oh yeah,
that's what a woman does, and then not being able. And so do you feel like Howard also gives that to her? Because not only does he clean up her mess, but he's like, you're beautiful, I love you.
Yeah, I mean, and especially like in X when they're sitting on the bed and he's like, you're still as beautiful as the first day I ever saw you. And of course, like, I was just like, oh my God, it's so sweet. They're probably going to kill someone, but this is so sweet, you know? Because I think, and I don't think it's just, you know, my opinion as a cisgender female, I don't think it's just women that want to feel that. I think anyone who identifies as having the capability to connect romantically with another person, we all want to feel that. We all want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be valued and desired and appreciated and wanted, but not just in one way, like all the ways. And I just, to me, that was very endearing. But it's funny because Maxine kind of extends this whole, you know, Pearl personality into, you know, I will not live a life I do not want or I do not deserve, right? And so for me, I feel like Maxine does not need anybody's validation, right? So she's kind of like chummy with her boyfriend, but I feel like if he's like, whatever, that's your problem, I don't need to be there for you, she'd be like, okay, next, I can validate myself. So we see like the difference between Pearl, early 1900s, needing validation, particularly from a male, to we get to Maxine, 1970s, sexual revolution, women coming into their own, people speaking out, so many different marginalized communities getting a voice finally, right? And then I don't need your validation. I do not need a man's validation. Like, if you're not gonna love me, someone else out there will. And you know what? I'm gonna love myself first. And I really appreciate that in Maxine. And even like Brittany Snow's character, I think she's very much about that as well. I mean, she's very intertwined with her partner, but she's still able to like stand on her own, which I think is very empowering. And like you said about Jenna Ortega's character, you know, she's kind of this like meek, like quote unquote nice girl, and then she comes into her own. Yeah.
So I'm curious what your take is. So, you know, we see in Pearl where I'm guessing she's pansexual, bisexual, and Howard's very supportive of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get into X, and it feels very heteronormative, the relationship, the porn they're filming. Do you have a thought on why that is or what happened? Or because we see it in Pearl where they're kind of expanding that. And I don't know, maybe if that's because Mia Goth co-wrote Pearl and wanted to bring in more of that stepping outside of heteronormative rules, or I was just curious, what's your take?
Yeah, so I think today in 2024, it's very heteronormative in X, but in the 1970s, it was groundbreaking because you have unwed people having sex, you have multiracial intercourse, so you have all of these different things going on that back then were considered maybe quote unquote out of the norm or not in touch with traditions and roles, right? That's the new sexual wave. So I think historically, if we look, it's more in line with the time that the film was supposed to take place. I think that Pearl's attraction to Maxine is not a sexual attraction. I think it's her romanticizing about her youth and what she could have been. That's my perspective. I'm really interested to see the film Maxine because that's going to take place in the 1980s, right? So we had a lot of, different voices during that time. We were hearing a lot more from the gay community, from the trans community, from all of these different groups of people who are gaining voices. And sadly, a lot of those voices gained were through tragedy, the HIV and AIDS crisis and the society that we lived in being trained not to care about people who were just trying to live their lives and who deserve so much better than what they got. So I think that we may see more of a diversity in terms of physical partnerships and unions and romantic relationships in Maxine. I hope we do. But I think for me, watching X, it was like, okay, well, this was the 1970s. This was considered risque for the time being. But now we're in the 2020s and things are quite different. And, there are a lot of different types of relationships and people have a variety of preferences. And I'm sure that at that time, people did as well. It was just much more difficult to kind of come out and be who you were. My gosh, I grew up in the 90s and I had friends. It was very difficult for them to come out. And that was not that long ago.
Yeah. Thank you for that perspective. I appreciate it as we're looking at how sexuality plays a role in these movies, and even, right, if Pearl was pansexual and that she had to be closeted her whole entire life, and that her attraction to Maxine is, because Maxine essentially is young Pearl. And I feel like you also touch on talking about sexuality, and you brought it up in the beginning, that the older you get, you are now supposed to be like a nun, or you are, and like geriatric sex is not a thing. And yes, our bodies change, there's erectile dysfunction and menopause. That doesn't mean that people still don't want to have sex. They still don't desire sex. And how our society very much is, there's a lot of people that I feel like, oh my gosh, the sex scene between Pearl and Howard in X, they were so grossed out. It's like, well, that's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's totally normal. I mean, like, look at the Golden Girls, right? Blanche, of course, is the big example that comes to mind. She's super sexual, and she's what, like 55? In the show. So, like, active dating, I know it's not horror genre, but all of the Golden Girls, even Sophia, who was in her 80s, they all were having sex with their partners, right? Which was pretty groundbreaking and crazy to think about, like, for, the late 80s to mid 90s. But there's nothing wrong with being like vibrant and enjoying your body and your partner's body. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And even though like you said, what our bodies are able to do and how they function and what they look like changes over time, there are options and solutions for that as well. It's, the sex industry is like a multi-billion-dollar a year industry for a reason, because everybody wants to do it, just nobody wants to talk about it. And even like I read somewhere in the late 1800s, women with high anxiety, they were actually prescribed to have more frequent orgasms. That was the solution.
Wow.
Which is very weird, because today you wouldn't hear like, oh, well, you're having a bad day, you probably just need to get laid. You know what I mean? Like, a professional would not say that to a client. I find it amusing in a way that, a male physician would tell a female client, like, oh, feeling a little bad? I got the solution for you. You know what I mean?
Yes. That's really interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And it's kind of strange how, if we look back historically, like, and I'm talking like years and years and years, centuries ago, a lot of cultures and groups, human sexuality was just part of everyday life. Yet we've, I guess, devolved into this taboo Western mentality.
Sex and death, things we don't want to talk about.
Yep. Very right. Yeah. And the other thing about the films, which I think the religiosity in Pearl to me is more about that rural life. Because, if you're doing something religiously, that does not mean you're following a subscribed book or code of conduct. Religious behavior can also be repetitive based on your own personal beliefs. So if I believe I need to be strong and tough and resilient, then I will be. Whereas in X, when we find out at the end that Maxine's dad is the TV preacher, it's like, okay, well, everything that she has done up to this point makes so much more sense now.
Yes, she's finding her sexuality. She's finding herself as a person. And sadly, religion takes that from people. And the emotional, psychological damage religion does. So many people are raised ultra religious, like her dad, the preacher, where sex is bad, you don't have sex, you're going to go to hell if you have sex. Then you get married and, oh, it's okay to have sex, and you need to satisfy your husband and all these things. And for the feminine body, in psyche, just the shock that does, you are conditioned to think this is a horrible thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not supposed to like it. And then wait, now I'm married. So all of a sudden it's okay. And I'm supposed to enjoy this.
Mm-hmm.
And being a therapist, there are so many people that they don't enjoy sex, that have grown up religious. They don't enjoy sex. It hurts because their whole life they were conditioned, and then they're trying to will themselves when even their body has grown to feel this repulsion for something. And so we can totally see Maxine being like, no, like, this is my body and I'm going to do with my body what I want. I felt that way too with Jenna Ortega's character too, where she was like, I'm curious about this. I think I want to
like give it a whirl.
Try this.
Yeah.
And even how her boyfriend, like, he shamed her, like, oh, you really want to do this? And how that happens in life when women start to speak their sexual truth in the bedroom. They'd be like, hey, let's bring some toys. Let's bring some gameplay. Let's bring these things. And more times than not, yes, there are wonderful supportive partners like, yes, let's do this. There are other partners that are, no, we're not going to do that. What's wrong with you? And just that shame. I feel like Jenna Ortega's character kind of embodied that shame when a woman wants to say, hey, I'm a sexual being and this is what I want to do. And then society, her boyfriend, no, what's wrong with you? And he couldn't handle her having sex with. Well, I kind of wonder if he was a bit jealous of the main porn star guy's name. I couldn't think of that. He was like, oh, now you'll be with him and he's a porn star.
Yeah. And that could be too. I mean, and I think the separation of that is, it wasn't as though she was having an affair. She was working. You know what I mean? And I think in the sex industry in general, that's such an assumption. Like, if you have all of these partners or you're doing all of these things because you're a sex worker, then you're dirty or you can't be monogamous or, you know, whatever it is. And like you said, I mean, it's really more based on someone who believes in sexuality and sees how those behaviors can help people. And I don't really, personally, I don't think anything's wrong with that. You know, I might get some flack for that, being a woman saying, hey, be sexual, be you, do what you gotta do. But, you know, I mean that for everyone. If you're consenting, someone else is consenting, it works for you, and it's not anything that would be harmful to you physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, like, who cares? Do it. Have fun. Enjoy it. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. And it's just unfortunate that society places such a stigma on sexuality in general and also sex workers.
Yes. Amen. I agree. It's the oldest profession and the least accepted.
Exactly. And there's
profession when, like you said.
There's this whole thing called like supply chain, supply and demand. There wouldn't be a sex industry if there wasn't cause and call for it. So, you know, supply chain.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, Margaret, I have to ask you, of both movies, who do you most relate to and why?
Yes, great question. I want to say with Pearl, the cow, I'm just hanging out, living my best life, watching the world, being entertained by people that I love. And then in X, I'm going to have to say the sheriff as like a counselor. I feel like I'm often the person that's going in after the aftermath and trying to put the pieces together and how are we healing and what happened. So those are my answers. You?
Surprise, surprise. In Pearl, I relate to Pearl. I empathize with her so much. And once again, I mean, growing up in like a more rural setting, I think a lot of that, you need to be tough. You need to do what's best for the family. You know, you don't have time to sit around and cry about anything. I think I identify a lot with that, and also having been a caregiver for a family member and those sorts of things. And in X, I actually identify a lot with Maxine. It's more of kind of breaking those bonds and figuring out how to live my life my own way, to suit me, which is still a work in progress. But both of those characters really, they got me. And I would venture to say that those two films are two of my favorites that I've seen recently. I highly recommend them. I think that they're great. There's so much more to those movies than just being like a run-of-the-mill slasher.
Oh yeah, they're not your run-of-the-mill slasher film, not at all.
No, and did you catch in the end of X when the sheriff was like, it must have been some crazy horror movie gone wrong that they were filming? That's like, it's so funny. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and the great part is too, you have all of these like genre adult type of themes, but you have that bizarre humor that like interjects throughout both movies. So I think it's great. I can't wait to see Maxine. I can't wait for us to talk about Maxine as well. Word on the street is that it's going to be a 1980 something whodunit on like a porn set. So I'm very excited for that.
Yes, me too. Can't wait.
Yes. And I guess until next time, we'll have to just suggest that everybody sit down, have a big old cup of Bruja Brew. If you haven't seen it yet, please, please, please watch X and then watch Pearl. Let us know what you think. And then you'll know why dear Pearl, Pearl, she's my girl. And you'll want to tell the whole world too. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.